Well, welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Being kind is the guys in this mess in the first place.
You can put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, banking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. And... wait... I'm just noticing my donation link for the Inessa Almond translation. I have two separate ones, just by accident. And... okay, there we go. That's the updated one. Excellent. There we go. Yes, that's a project very near and dear to me that I've been working on for the past several months. And that's the donation tracker for it, and I just noticed that I had not actually had the up-to-date one on there. Well, we've got some interesting bullshit to look at. As usual, we've got actually an interesting exception to the usual rule. Bonsoir. Usually, there's absolutely no reason anyone who values their mental health should do what I'm going to suggest that we do. But this is an exception. I am talking about looking at some YouTube comments. Because, you see, Ben Shapiro had a take on the whole United Healthcare executive accountability situation. And his audience was actually not having it. The evil revolutionary left cheers murder. I mean, look at the stuff. Look at these comments. Let me just make sure that the size it's big enough that you can actually see them. Maybe I need to magnify those. Okay, so we've got, hey Ben, daily listener and fan here, just letting you know that your wealth is showing. Don't forget, poor people like us are victims of healthcare fraud. When my provider denied my claim, I didn't have enough money to hire a lawyer and sue. Like, his audience just is not having this. And I hope this could be one of those moments. I've said yesterday, I was saying this is a moment where, the working class, we get to see each other. And I think this is perhaps a moment where a lot of the people who follow these chuds realize that actually they don't give a fuck about them. That literally they are shooting themselves in the foot here, just in the interest of getting to have somebody reaffirm their bigotry and their racism. They're talking to people who are completely out of touch with them. Unsubbed, find another audience to play apologist to the people who make the lives out of hardworking Americans difficult. I just realized that your entire business model requires that us normal folk hate each other. I hate to break it to you, buddy, but it's not just the left who is sick of this. And of course, here's the thing. You're seeing a lot of this neither right nor left nonsense, and we should always be very, very careful of that, because that is always a far-right thing. The point here is not so much that this isn't a right versus left thing. It's just that people who are on the right, like working class people who are on the right, for whatever fucking reason, are realizing in this moment that the people they listen to in order to reaffirm their, like, racism and their transphobia and all the other shitty things that they want to believe in are actually selling them that shit, at the same time as they're always going to stand with a United Healthcare CEO over them. Yeah, I know, the likes. I mean, yeah, we have some evil leftists, people calling themselves evil leftists. Like, okay, somebody says, just because the left likes something doesn't mean you have to instinctively hate it. Wake up and read the room, bro. Sorry, Ben, lifelong conservative, and don't have an ounce of sympathy for this CEO. How many Americans have died because of his company's greed? Healthcare shouldn't be a choice between living and permanently being in crippling debt. Yeah, I mean, these are his comments. This is his fucking audience absolutely cooking him. So I wanted to show that up front because...
Well, we have updates in the search for the murderer of the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson, and of course, on Wednesday. And there are some pretty deep ramifications for American society and all this. We'll get to that in a moment. First time is running out.
I mean, what I love is Ben Shapiro is going to pretend that he cares about human life now. He's going to talk about how bad killing is. He's been cheering the genocide in Gaza. Like, the people who have been the most just pearl clutching about how people have no sympathy for Brian Thompson, former CEO of United Healthcare, absolute just criminal scam of a company, are the same people who will give you a detailed argument about why they think it's okay for, like, Israeli snipers to shoot Palestinian babies.
2 Plus is 50% off, but not for much longer. Get a full year of uncensored shows, exclusive series, documentaries, and more, all at half the price.
God, who the fuck would pay for this shit?
.com/cyberweek before it is too late. Alrighty, so on Wednesday, as we know, the United Health executive, Brian Thompson, was shot to death on the streets of New York. Authorities are still searching for the suspect at this point, according to the Wall Street Journal. Police are combing New York City for the suspect who used a Sharpie to write "deny, defend, and depose" on cartridges.
I heard that it was engraved on them, actually.
They're believed to have come out of his gun when it jammed, according to law enforcement officials. Some of those words are commonly associated with tactics insurers use to avoid paying claims.
I mean, it's actually, I didn't actually remember this, but I was watching Greg Stoker's video on this, which was very good, very hilarious, and he pointed out that a book from like 20, 30 years ago about the U.S. private health insurance scam was called Deny, Delay, Defend, and that this is probably a reference to that.
Investigators believe that the suspect may be staying or may have stayed at a hostel on Manhattan's Upper West Side. The NYPD hasn't publicly identified the person who ambushed Brian Thompson. However, they have released an image of the person, quote-unquote, wanted for questioning.
I mean, an image of somebody in a Starbucks nearby who has a similar height and build and a similar outfit. I stress that because this is a city of millions, and it's not impossible that somebody was wearing a similar jacket. The photos of the guy who definitely did, the images of the guy who actually definitely did the shooting do not show his full face, and I mean, the ones I've seen are very poor quality. So that CCTV in the Starbucks might be him, might not be him, and really, I mean, any decent defense lawyer would be able to just rip the shit out of that chain of evidence. Sí, vamos a ver. A alguien va a tener que echarle la culpa.
They released his face. He's smiling and wearing a hood in one of the photos as he appears to lean on a counter. Authorities are offering up a reward of up to 10 grand for information.
That's all? Like, they have having a no-holds-barred manhunt for this guy. The feds are involved. Over just a New York City shooting. The feds are involved. And they're gonna offer just 10 fucking grand? That's not even the average medical debt people are in. Yeah, I mean, I have a feeling. I mean, there are 330 million people who have motive, like
leading to an arrest in the case. The real question in all of this is how Americans respond. So Taylor Lorenz, we talked about her yesterday. She is a psychotic former reporter for the Washington Post and the New York Times.
Yes, and that little bit of ableism is because the far right like to accuse her of doxing Chaya Raichik, aka Libs of TikTok, who actually does the thing that they're accusing Taylor Lorenz of doing. I mean, it's just hilarious. I love that Taylor Lorenz is in the middle of this. Specifically because of this. Because they cannot bring her up without utterly telling on themselves. Because the whole reason they're pissed off at Taylor Lorenz is she did a humiliating interview with Chaya Raichik. And Chaya Raichik does the thing that they claim to be against ever since the CEO adjustment. Ajusticiamiento. But when Chaya Raichik does it, they applaud, and they retweet, and they celebrate when somebody calls in a bomb threat at a children's hospital on the strength of her stochastic terrorism. But they're gonna clutch pearls over this.
She's totally insane. She was insane on COVID. She was insane when it came to the supposed predations of people on the right who ought to, she said, be shut out of media, and particularly social media.
What supposed predations, Ben? Let's have details. And what did she say about COVID? I've never heard her say anything about COVID, although the fact that Ben Shapiro is unimpressed with what she said about COVID tells me it's probably at least somewhat more valid. What? That Ben Shapiro is a major prick? I think most people think Ben Shapiro is a major prick. In fact, looking at those comments, I think Ben Shapiro's fan base is starting to discover that Ben Shapiro is a major prick. It's a beautiful moment.
Well, now she is full-scale rallying in favor of the murderer. So she tweeted yesterday on Blue Sky, which is a weird left-wing echo chamber form of Twitter. There was a post put out.
A weird left-wing echo chamber form of Twitter. That reminds me. Transphobic fraud and stalker Jesse Singal has announced a plan. He wants to try to this is his word, colonize Blue Sky with normal people. So everybody go and block his ass. If you're on Blue Sky, go and block Jesse Singal. His name on there, I'm going to just write it out. jessesingal.com. Just go over and block the prick. You will not regret doing it because he's a transphobic fraud. But yeah, so he's trying to sort of, in his words, colonize Blue Sky, the weird left-wing echo chamber version of Twitter, as Ben just put it.
By Blue Cross Blue Shield. All about whether it was going to pay for anesthesia under its healthcare coverage. And she then tweeted out, quote, and people wonder why we want these executives dead.
Well, yeah, people do wonder, Ben. Imagine, this is a thing that happens already. That sometimes anesthesiologists will miscalculate the anesthesia, and people will wake up in the middle of surgery. The stuff will wear off. Now imagine if the insurance company just says, They will not cover anesthesia beyond a certain duration of an operation, and if you can't afford it, well, you're going to get it without anesthesia. You think that'd be fun, do you, Ben? Why don't you go, like Christopher Hitchens, to his credit, had himself do a mild version of so-called waterboarding in order to demonstrate that it was cool. Like, so, Ben, why don't you go and have surgery without anesthesia? Something serious, some abdominal surgery, maybe an appendectomy, you know, maybe just a laparotomy or something like that. No anesthesia, and show us how much of a non-issue this is.
So openly cheering the death of Brian Thompson, that wasn't her only post. Somebody put out a statement saying, quote, legislation idea, healthcare executives and their families must be on the cheapest plan their company offers, and they aren't allowed to seek other care. And she wrote in all capital letters, indoors.
Wait, Ben, are you saying that being forced to be on the cheapest health insurance plan is equivalent to being murdered? I mean, what? Surely you should have no problem with this, because Ben, you're the one who says that there's no problem with this healthcare system.
Then she put out a post that showed a graphic of a happy star, like a star with a happy face and balloons, and the caption CEO down. And she wrote, woke up to see this spammed in my group chats. And she said, I am not alone, that other people were doing the same thing. Then she reposted a post from left-wing agitator Ken Klippenstein.
Left-wing agitator. Interesting to note, if you try to post any of his journalism on Facebook, they will actually censor it as inauthentic behavior, a term that they've never explained what they mean by it.
And today we remember the legacy of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. And what exactly was that legacy? The claim denial rates by insurance companies. And
yes, and it showed. Are you going to show that one, Ben? Because it showed that his company had a 32% in-network denial rate. Nearly 1/3, nearly 1 in 3 claims in-network were denied by his company. It was by far the highest rate. Are you going to show?
Of course, it's not just Taylor Lorenz. Socialist Nathan Robinson, a complete useless leech on the ass of society, posted himself.
You know, as opposed to Brian Thompson, who gives back to the ass of society. I mean, like, especially with all that phosphorus.
Live your life in such a way that people will be sad when you die. That was above a screen cap of a New York Times headline that said, torrent of hate for health insurance industry follows CEO's killing.
I can see why this is... I can see why guys like Ben Shapiro are feeling sensitive about this. Because it's like the ghost of Christmas future for them. They're realizing that nobody will have anything good to say about them when they go. And a lot of people will be very happy to see them go.
That piece from the New York Times is all about people who apparently were perfectly fine with the murder of Brian Thompson on the streets of New York City.
Why do you keep on pointing out it was on the streets of New York City? If it were indoors, you'd be better off. You'd be okay with it? If it was on the streets of Hoboken, New Jersey, it would be okay? What about if we do it on the streets of Toronto?
According to the New York Times, none of this stopped social media commentators from leaping to conclusions and showing a blatant lack of sympathy over the death of a man who was a husband and father of 2 children.
I wonder if any of the people who died because his company denied them health care had children and loved ones.
Thoughts and deductibles to the family, read one comment underneath a video of the shooting posted online by CNN.
Wait, are you saying that deductibles are a bad thing, Ben?
Unfortunately, my condolences are out of network. A TikTok user wrote, quote, I'm an ER nurse, and the things I've seen dying patients get denied for by insurance makes me physically sick. I just can't feel sympathy for him because of all those patients and their families.
Like, Ben, I you know, now I see what these, like, his fan base are saying. He clearly thought that he could read that and it would lead his audience to sympathize with Brian Thompson. Like, you could pick the ones where people were just, like, snarking and memeing on it and just laughing at him. and just do it that way. But instead, he specifically decided in this video, which he edited, he could have cut this out, to include the one where an ER nurse says lots of patients who are in life-threatening situations are getting denied care over bullshit. And he's surprised that his audience... Well, we don't know if he's surprised yet. It'll be interesting to see what his response will be, or if he even acknowledges that his audience is not with him on this.
And these sorts of messages were incredibly common across the internet. We discussed yesterday a Columbia professor who wrote something very similar. Unfortunately, bubbling under the surface of all this is something very serious, really serious.
People hate the rich, guys. People hate the rich, Chad. It's terrible. It's terrible if you're a rich guy like Ben is.
Is that serious thing? The revolutionary left is creeping into the mainstream. Yesterday we talked about
No, that's not what's happening, Ben. It's not the revolutionary left is not creeping into the mainstream. Like, here's the thing. If you look at polls, and I'm not talking about the executive summaries, and I definitely don't mean the media coverage, which is misleading as fuck at the best of times. I'm talking about you go into the polls, you look at the data tables. Sometimes it's called the crosstabs. On some of them, it's paywalled, but on a lot of the bigger ones, it's available for free. And that shows you what questions were asked. And it shows you what the options for the answers were, and it breaks down the answers by demographics. And you look at that stuff, you will find, going back, like the earliest examples I've seen are from the 80s. Where, during the bicentennial of the U.S. Constitution, they did, sort of a quiz survey thing, asked people, do you think the right to health care should be in the Constitution? They also asked, do you think that health care is a right that is specifically enshrined in the Constitution? A majority said yes. It definitely should be a right, and a lot of people thought it was, because of course in the U.S. we have this religion of the Constitution. So people just assume anything that they see as just obviously good and proper must be in the Constitution. And then you look at what kind of healthcare system people would like, and people have been asked for 40 years now, would you like some kind of single-payer type situation, a public health system where you don't have to pay a dime to get the care you need, and it's just kind of financed through tax revenues and shit? Overwhelmingly, year after year, people say they're for it. In 2011, when there was the crisis, when there was Occupy, and there was a lot of crisis of legitimacy around Wall Street CEOs, there was a study which, as far as I know, they haven't done it again, which is a pity. It was a really good one, which asked, various professions. Which professions do you consider? What you had to do was, they said, you would have to say whether you agree or disagree with the statement, such and such an industry is generally honest and trustworthy. The health insurance industry had 7% of respondents agree with that. 7%. The gun industry and big tobacco were the only ones to have a lower approval rating in that sense. This isn't the revolutionary left creeping. It would be cool if we could take credit for that. But no, this is just the fact that ordinary common sense of the majority of the population says, based on their life experience, based on their experiences with healthcare, that this system sucks. That the problem is the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies and the fact that they can just manipulate everything for profit. And they feel that the answer is maybe not do that, so that people could just go to the fucking doctor when they need things, and they could get the care and the meds that they need without having to take out a fucking mortgage. And what's interesting is, and it shouldn't be too surprising after looking at that comment thread, these findings are consistent. Actually, majorities of people who vote for Republicans also say they want to cut the insurance industry out and have some sort of public health care system. literally the only reason, and and this is just one of the reasons that I think it's actually kind of wonderful that we're having this moment, because these people's audiences, these chuds' audiences, are seeing that actually, when it comes to a basic thing that has a major effect on their daily life, has possibly like ruined the lives of killed people that they know and love, these guys are on a totally different moral planet from them.
This is the left. Liberals are people who disagree with me on public policy, but aren't in favor of, the murder of their opponents. The left is a different thing.
Well, I mean, you're in favor of the murder of at least some of your opponents. At least you don't seem to be dead set against it.
The shooting of Thompson has unleashed a wave of evil from members of the left. Thompson was not a criminal.
Yeah, well, that's because guys like him get to decide what's a crime. That's how capitalism works. Like, you have a government that exists in order to mostly sort of regulate the internal and external relations of the capitalist class. And what's a crime depends very heavily on what capitalists think ought to be a crime. So guys like Brian Thompson don't think it ought to be a crime to screw people out of large amounts of money on a false promise to provide them with healthcare when they need it, and then let them die.
An advocate of death, the way, for example, abortion or euthanasia advocates are. And by the way, murdering an abortionist or an advocate of euthanasia would be unjustifiable morally in a democratic system. Brian Thompson's great sin...
Wait, why do you add in a democratic system? Because maybe I haven't actually heard Shapiro say this, so... But a lot of right-wingers will be like, this isn't a democratic system, this is a constitutional republic. And, I mean, if you're taking that line, then adding in a democratic system seems to be a way of saying, yeah, actually, in this situation, it's okay. And he certainly knows that a lot of his audience will take it that way, because a lot of his audience are the sort of people who will do that annoying bullshit.
According to these people, is that he was the head of a company that exists within a mixed private-public healthcare framework, and that he did his job. Because that's how health insurance actually works. Some things are...
Well, that's the point. We understand that that's how health insurance actually works. That's why everybody's actually kind of happy that firearms worked the way they did that morning in New York.
Some things are not. And you may not like the application of the coverage, and it may be bad. That is not an excuse for murder. But for the left...
Well, it's an excuse for murder of the insured, though.
You hate the system, nor morally justified in murdering anyone who acts within the system.
Well, no, that's not what we're saying. Like, somebody who follows the traffic laws is acting within the system. Somebody who collects signatures and arranges to have, like, a binding referendum on, I don't know, abortion rights or something like that, to protect abortion rights, I mean, they're acting within the system. I don't think you'd find a whole lot of revolutionary leftists saying that those people are fair game. The problem here isn't acting within the system. It is actually being in a position of power within the system and using that power in order to murder people for money.
That means that if, like one Bernie Sanders follower did, you believe that private healthcare kills Americans, you can go...
That's not a belief, though. That's literally not a belief. We have hard numbers. Like, facts don't care about your feelings, Ben. And the fact is that the most recent figures I saw, which were for 2020, the beginning of the pandemic... private healthcare killed 202,000 people in the U.S.
Murdering Congress people. I know we buried that one. The media pretended it never happened. Steve Scalise is still limping today because he was nearly shot to death by a Bernie Sanders fan who believed that being part of the quote-unquote system that didn't nationalize healthcare meant you were a murderer.
Well, I mean, the thing is, being a part of the system at the level that somebody like that is at does make them a murderer. Because this system is constantly murdering people. Mostly, though, it's people that Ben Shapiro is happy to see dead.
Stuff means that if you don't like that health insurers often deny coverage for certain pre-existing conditions or non-covered doctors or medication, you can then murder the CEO of a health insurance company.
But
This is revolutionary leftist evil. And it's evil for a couple of reasons. First...
yeah, it's always great when you have to explain why the thing that you're saying is evil is evil.
Violence is not justified in a democracy, where your say is part of the process. This is...
Yeah, but this isn't a democracy, it's a constitutional republic.
Why democracies are generally good? Because they outsource the violence to the government.
That's... Okay, so you're saying that the violence, it's evil. It's not that the violence is evil. It's just that somebody was muscling in on the public sector's monopoly on it, and that's the problem?
Revolution to overthrow tyranny is justified, but tyranny has to be actually real, and violence has to be the last resort.
And who gets to decide that, Ben?
I didn't like public policy in California, so I picked up my family and my company, and we left.
Wow, it must really be good to have money to do that.
Okay, tyranny is not real in the case of healthcare in the United States. And violence is not being used as last resort.
Well, I mean, violence is being used by the entire healthcare system, though.
Particular case. If you perceive America to be a tyranny and violence to be the proper response, that is a call for unending violence until the system itself is changed.
Well, no, it's not necessarily a call for just unending violence. It's a call for all sorts of things. But, like, Ben, as you pointed out, it's not that the system's non-violent. It's just, I mean, he specifically said violence is outsourced to the state. So his problem isn't violence. His problem is very specifically who's doing it to whom.
It's a call for revolution. When you say it's okay to murder CEOs on the street, that is a call for revolution.
Well, second, no, that's okay. There I have to differ, because the thing is, okay, this can spark things. I think it is kind of sparking something. I mean, when you see Ben Shapiro's comments telling him that he's completely misreading the room on this, when he tries to attribute all this to the revolutionary left, it might spark something. But, like, shooting CAOs in itself is not revolution. It does not actually change any social relations in itself. Like, they went on, they did not miss a beat. That motherfucker got shot. And they just went off and had their shareholder meeting like nothing happened. Just, they already popped a new asshole into his post. I mean, the fucking chair wasn't even cold yet. They already had somebody new for it. Like, the social relation did not happen. This is not revolution. It could potentially lead to revolutionary developments, because part of, I mean, as I read history, a big part of what leads to revolutionary developments is when oppressed and exploited people realize that a whole lot of other people are seeing what they're seeing and feel the same way about it. That is a key thing, because that is a big part of what makes it seem possible to do something. That's why the media, like, after the, during the 2020 uprising, after the first couple of days when, you saw the destruction of the 3rd Precinct all over the place, and, like, footage of, like, burnt out cop cars in LA and all this other wonderful shit, they started to just completely clamp down and stop showing that, because they realized at a certain point, people were realizing that people were watching this and saying, holy shit, large numbers of people throughout the country feel the same way I do about this, feel that this is legitimate, this is a major moment, and, it was encouraging it, and so they shut it down. So this could spark a revolutionary thing because of the public reception and the fact that we all get to see the public reception. But it isn't inherently revolution. As a book that I haven't read puts it, you can't blow up a social relation.
Violence against members of private industry, that isn't even a protest of public policy. Let's be fair about this.
Well, I mean, being fair about it, yeah, it is kind of a protest of public policy, though.
Isn't even shooting politicians, which would be evil enough.
Well, you're shooting the people who pay the politicians, though.
It's even a different level of evil, because it's a protest against the very system of free markets themselves. Brian Thompson isn't responsible for America's healthcare system.
Yeah, he's just the head of one of the largest health insurance rackets in the country.
more than the head of CVS is responsible for America's trade system.
Well, yeah, except in the sense that they are in a position of power within that system, and they profit heavily from that power, and they're doing so at the expense of basically everyone else.
Directing hatred against Brian Thompson is not about shaping public policy.
Well, why wouldn't it be?
Because you could shoot every CEO in America and it wouldn't shape public policy.
I don't know about that, Ben. Are you suggesting a test? Because it seems to me if you had a situation where every CEO in the country was getting shot, I think public policy would be changing. Now, whether it would be changing in ways that the people doing the shooting would approve of, I think that would depend very heavily, but I don't think public policy is going to stay the same if there's a situation going on where every CEO in the country is having to live in a bunker.
It turns out that it's about trying to threaten anyone who engages in free markets at all. This is simply...
Yeah, which is why this guy also went out, and when he was at the Starbucks, where there's a whole bunch of people engaging in free markets, whatever the fuck that means, to, buy coffee and shit. That's why he opened fire on them. Oh, wait, he didn't. Maybe there's a difference between people who participate in capitalism and people who are at the very fucking top of the pyramid.
Marxist, leftist, radical evil. This person could just as easily have shot a doctor.
I want that t-shirt. Marxist, leftist, radical evil. MLRE.
Who decided not to perform a surgery. Or shot a bank CEO who denied a loan application for a home. It would have fallen under the same category. This, by the way, is not uncommon, unfortunately, in modern Western history. This was all the philosophy of the Red Army faction in Germany in the 1970s. That was known as the Baader-Meinhof gang. They weren't seeking...
Not Baader. Baader-Meinhof.
Better world. They were seeking to tear down the world of capitalism on behalf of Marxist revolutionary evil. These are people...
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's exactly what Ulrike Meinhof in her writing said, that they were doing it in the name of Marxist revolutionary evil. And that's why they specifically targeted a bunch of unrepentant Nazis who had made billions and billions of dollars in the Federal Republic and had gotten off with complete impunity because of Marxist revolutionary evil.
People who routinely quoted Herbert Marcuse and Antonio Gramsci. They called for revolution. Ulrike Meinhof, a left-wing...
Ulrike? Like, what is that? Ulrique? Ulrike, verdammt nochmal. Sprich's mindestens richtig aus, du Arsch.
Radical journalist led the way. She famously said, quote, "Protest is when I say this does not please me. Resistance is when I ensure what does not please me occurs no more."
I mean, that's not a great translation, but it's an accurate quote. And I've thought, I mean, that is the best distinction that I've ever seen between protest and resistance, and I think it's a pretty accurate one. But, I mean...
And that language is replete with echoes in today's society, from college campuses to left-wing media.
Yeah, because those ideas actually still have a lot of resonance. And are you saying that that's a bad thing? Like, you just had one of the most easily just commonsensical things that she ever said. Something that I would imagine a lot of people who do not consider themselves to be Marxist revolutionary evilists or whatever the fuck would probably agree with, because it's just a terminological distinction between two things. Where's the part where you explain that that's evil?
That philosophy led the Baader-Meinhof gang to engage in routine assassination of everyone from industrialists like Hans Martin Schleyer to
yeah, a Nazi.
Dresdner bankhead Jürgen Ponto to
another Nazi.
American soldiers in Germany.
Not Nazis, but they were engaged in mass murder and genocide in Vietnam at the time.
These people also sometimes become the tools of enemy regimes. Baader-Meinhof certainly was. They worked with the Stasi, the East German Stasi, other Soviet agents.
Actually, not so much. I mean, they had a working relationship, but it's a mistake to assume that that means that they were actually directed by them. I mean, the East German state security did actually let them have a safe haven occasionally in East Berlin when they needed it. But East Germany actually was not all that keen on what they were doing, because they felt that it was actually potentially going to aggravate the situation from their perspective.
To foment chaos, they coordinated with terrorist groups like the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and the Palestine Liberation Organization itself. The origins of Baader Meinhof came from the 1968 student protests in Germany. Does any of this sound familiar?
Probably not. I don't think that Ben Shapiro... Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Ben Shapiro's audience is like, oh, you mean May 1968? Right. No, they don't fucking know what this stuff is.
They were Marxist in orientation. They were actually influenced by the 1965 Watts riots in the United States, radical race riots in the United States, in which violence was somehow justified.
Well, certain violence, it was a response to violence that was not justified, is the point, though, Ben. It's interesting how the violence here, he very quickly skips over it, even when it's violence by his own definition, because he said, violence is outsourced to the state. Not wrong about that, although if you're going to try to make a moral argument here, you probably want to avoid acknowledging that. But yeah, I mean, in each of these cases, we're talking about a response to extreme violence. I mean, like, the people he listed, he forgot to mention they were Nazis. Like, they were Nazi criminals who got off, who, like, never were tried, never had to fear for anything, got to keep all the money that they made in Nazi Germany. In fact, I mean, that is true of the richest families in Germany today. They are all profiteers from the Nazi era. They all made money off of Aryanizations. None of them had to give any of that back. I mean, there's a bit of violence involved in that. I'm pretty sure you would have to agree, Ben.
They allied with radicals all over the globe. They would read Che Guevara. They wrote essays.
God, what is it with people not understand? It's not a hard name to pronounce, for fuck's sake. Guevara.
Defending the Munich massacre of Israeli Olympians by Palestinian terrorists. Stephen Ost is an author who literally wrote the book on the Baader Meinhof gang. And he points out,
he wrote a book. It isn't the book. It's one book. There are a lot of books on the Red Army faction.
A measure of support that violent leftists in the United States, like the Weather Underground, never enjoyed. A poll at the time showed a quarter of West Germans under 40 felt sympathy for the gang. 1/10 said they would hide a gang member from the police. Prominent intellectuals spoke up.
Yeah, this is all true, incidentally. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, actually, they had a lot of resonance because they picked their targets well. They picked targets that they knew were not going to have a lot of sympathy amongst the people they were trying to appeal to, namely rich Nazis.
Gang's righteousness, as Germany, even into the 1970s, was still a guilt-ridden society. When the gang started robbing banks, newscasts compared its members to Bonnie and Clyde. Andreas Baader, a charismatic action man indulged in the imagery, told people his favorite movies were Bonnie and Clyde, which had recently come out, and The Battle of Algiers, which is an anti-colonial propaganda piece on behalf of actual groups that would end up with an Islamic fascist regime in Algeria.
It's on behalf of actual groups. Like, tell us about the regime that existed in Algeria before that, though.
A poster of Che Guevara hung on his wall. He paid a designer to make a Red Army faction logo, a drawing of a machine gun against a red star. So,
yeah, it's a great logo. It was very well done.
What exactly are we supposed to make of journalists, pseudo-journalists like Taylor Lorenz, or academics like that Columbia professor who proclaimed soft support for the murder of Brian Thompson?
And, define soft support.
Well, I mean, I think that we should take it as a leading, bleeding-edge indicator that we are on the verge of something terrible.
And I just love to hear when Ben Shapiro says that we're on the bleeding edge of something terrible, it's something good. And I just have to say, as a Jew, I hate that he wears a kippah. I hate that he associates his bullshit with our culture. Like, please, take that thing off when you're doing your fast shit, Ben. Shut the fuck up. Or leave it on and shut the fuck up. That's cool too.
These acts of violence, they're not quite as sporadic as they used to be. This follows hard on the Black Lives Matter riots, which burned cities, did $2 billion.
No, they didn't burn cities. They burned some cop cars. They burned a couple of police stations. They didn't burn cities.
$1 billion in property damage, and were indulged and even celebrated by many on the left.
Now, tell us what the uprising was against there. Was there any violence that uprising was in response to, maybe?
The Hamas takeover of college campuses.
Everyone remembers that when Hamas, like, he's not even fucking Israeli. He doesn't have an Israeli accent, and he still, like, mispronounces it like they do, Hamas. Like, everyone remembers when Hamas took over college campuses. Like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude?
Again, indulged and celebrated by the left-wing elite, up to and including the Democratic presidential candidate for the United States.
Who called them anti-Semitic and applauded police attacks on them.
And now, the not-so-quiet applause for the assassination of a private healthcare CEO. The toxic brew of radicalism and violence that characterized the 70s in Germany and the United States, actually, because it happened in the U.S., too.
Yeah, there was the 1970s in the U.S., too.
Enormous number of terror bombings in the United States in the 1970s. All that stuff is bubbling again. And why not?
Yeah, very good question. Why not? Let's hear it, Ben. I mean, okay, we got the climate's fucked. We've got a ruling class who refuse to even acknowledge that it's a problem, let alone even seriously talk about the things we would need to do in order to have any chance of having long-term livable ecology on this planet. We've got this completely unacknowledged pandemic that's going on and ruining millions of people's lives. It's on track to kill 2 million people pretty soon. You got the genocide in Palestine, and the entire political class is cool with that. With the exception of, like, Rashida Tlaib, who, I have to say, I don't stand Democrats, but she actually passes, like, my very minimum test of the seriousness of a progressive Democrat, in that she calls out her own party. Fucking AOC fails that. Fucking Bernie Sanders never came close to passing that shit, but she actually calls out Democrats. And I will give her that. She still is one. So I don't stand her, but that's like a sign of some level of integrity that a lot of her colleagues don't go anywhere near. I mean, so you got that genocide. You've got the U.S. basically willing to start World War III in order to make that genocide continue until it is completed. Now, I mean, that includes resuming a hot war in Syria explicitly in order to cut off the arms supply of the Lebanese resistance that was causing serious problems for Israel. There was a meeting actually with Assad and leaders from the UAE and I think Saudi, where they said, we'll call this whole thing off, including the U.S. sanctions on the Syrian economy, if you cut off the flow of arms to the Lebanese resistance so that the genocide can go undisturbed. So I wonder why it is. Oh yeah, that's right. And the cops are still acting like, they're just acting as private white supremacist death squads. So I wonder why this would be bubbling up.
Many of the people who engaged in precisely that sort of violence are now well-respected American academics. We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, there's no shortage of flashy ads from the big wireless carriers offering the
oh god, yes.
iPhone for free. A little deeper, quickly realize what that really means. Qualify, you need to trade in your phone, and not just any phone, $1,000. Then you're required to sign up for a $100 month unlimited plan and a sneaky $35 activation fee on top of all that.
Yeah, shut the fuck up.
There's a quick and easy solution. Home Title Lock offers spurred to action by constant talk of the fascistic takeover of Donald Trump. They can be counted on to
including talk from Trump himself, it's worth noting.
increase their support for violence. I mean, there were 2 assassination attempts against Donald Trump in the last 6 months. That's an indicator of just how deeply this rot is spreading. And it
God, I mean, he talks about this stuff like it's bad.
It has to be stopped. It has to be stopped. It can only be stopped by a widespread rejection on all sides of the aisle for this type of violence. And
yeah, how'd that go, Ben? Check your comments, Ben. Tell us how the widespread rejection went.
For support of this type of violence, the shooter in this case, we can only hope, is arrested and should be given the death penalty. Seedbeds.
Wait. He should be given the death penalty. Why? Like, I don't remember Ben having anything like that sort of response to so many other murders. But this one is especially bad. Why is he especially bad, Ben? Is it just that it's a rich white dude who holds the lives of people in his hands? Is that what it was?
Leninist violence on college campuses. I hope the incoming Department of Education defunds all of it. Defunds all of it. Pseudo-journalists like Taylor Lorenz should not only be rejected from polite society, all of the publications that hired her knowing she was a nut and then promoted her.
Oh, no, we still haven't actually heard any evidence that she is that.
Knowing she was a nut should be called on the carpet.
Have you got examples?
The American public. The Brian Thompson shooting is a bleeding-edge indicator of where the country could be going.
Well,
it's the reason why there were security professionals who were wondering why he was walking around without security. Hey, that says something about the American body politic.
Yeah, it says that people are kind of sick of being screwed over by these assholes. It says that people have way more self-respect than his business model wants them to have. Because his whole business model, and it really is just brought into very clear, very profound relief by the comment thread right now, is all about taking people who, and like using the most reactionary, bigoted, base instincts that they have against them. Getting them to essentially ally with schmucks like this, and much richer schmucks, just so that they can have somebody reaffirm them in their, affirm the worst things about them. Hey, Phoenix! Long time, how you doing? Good to see you.
That I know now have to have 24/7 security just because of the climate of violence that is bubbling under the surface.
Yeah, I agree. No CEO should ever have 24/7 security. His eyebrows, I think he plucks. And I think whoever is doing the plucking has been instructed to give him the bushy Spock.
All it takes is somebody with some organizational capacity on the left to launch America into a new era of domestic terrorism with the tacit moral support of much of the journalistic establishment.
Wait, now you're against domestic terrorism. I mean, I remember you... The reason you're angry at Taylor Lorenz is that she humiliated somebody who is doing domestic terrorism.
Meanwhile, of course, many of those people in the journalistic establishment will claim it's the right that's violent in the United States. That is
well, yeah, just because that's the facts.
Not the story of the last 10, 15 years.
Well, I mean, except for, again, the facts. Remember when, admittedly, Ben's feelings don't care about facts, but if you actually look at the FBI statistics, and the FBI, not known to be friends of the left, in fact, they have spent more of their time persecuting leftists than just about any other thing they've ever done. You look at their figures, and these are replicated internationally. You look at Western Europe, you look at Britain, you look at Germany, you look at, just EU-wide as well. And what you find is the only terrorist threat to speak of is coming from the far right. Like not just most of the violence, not like 50% plus 1, but like 98% plus 9. Of the violence, and often the only reason that it is less than 100% is because of some fake ass sting operations that they did with some mentally unwell and desperate Muslim, where they fitted him up in some sort of bullshit attack that was never going to happen, and then they counted their statistics, and that's how the fash come under 100%. So those would be the facts, Ben. But Ben's feelings don't care about
American
this.
Life. And certainly is not the story today. And it's something we need to watch out for, because this has happened in the West before, and once that can of violence is open, it is very difficult.
Well, I mean, it would be so weird if the can of violence was opened. Like, I mean, wouldn't that be so weird if there was violence in this society? I don't know what we'd do if there was violence in this society.
Close again without concerted action, not just by law enforcement, but by an American public that decides it doesn't want to have anything to do with these people.
Yeah, Ben, about that. The American public, they got together, and it turns out we're kind of cool with this.
It's something deeply disturbing and scary that there are so many people who are blasé about the murder.
I don't know if you've been watching all along, Phoenix, but we started by looking at his comment thread, where his audience was cooking him over this. Talking about, saying things like, I'm a lifelong conservative, but you've got the wrong end of the stick on this one, pal. Everybody understands why this guy, why somebody would pop this asshole.
Private healthcare CEO, because they don't like the way the healthcare system works in the United States.
Yeah, because it sucks.
It can be done with literally any business in the country. Any business. Name an industry, and you can make the case that something unfair is happening in the industry.
I mean, he's not wrong. He's absolutely right. This is why capitalism sucks. So, I mean, we gotta listen to Ben here. It's not enough. You can't just go shooting CEOs because capitalism is based on exploitation. We need to have a communist revolution, like Ben is saying.
This is why socialists leech scavenger lingo used by people like Bernie Sanders.
What is leeching scavenger lingo?
If you want to talk about stochastic terrorism, if you want to talk about rhetoric...
Yeah, well, you mean like your friend Kachaya Rajcik. And, I mean, I love the idea that the left is leeching off of Bernie Sanders. It's literally the other way around. Bernie Sanders got his talking points, like, nobody had heard of him before, like, 2011. And then Occupy happened, and it was like his moment. And so then he started talking about the 1% and all that stuff, which was not a term that he had coined. That was something off of Occupy. I mean, he rode that wave. It wasn't people were like leeching off of Bernie Sanders, for fuck's sake. It was Bernie Sanders looking for relevance.
That leads to a higher possibility of violence. When you suggest that everything in American life is unfair and bad and rigged by the system. When you suggest that, and then you suggest that anybody who does business is merely an apparatchik of that system.
Well, I mean, define apparatchik. He seems to be saying that if you don't lie about the system, then you're doing stochastic terrorism.
The result is a support for revolutionary violence. You're raising that...
Well, yeah, Ben, I think you'll find most of us who want revolution would be cool with it being peaceful. It just turns out that the ruling class doesn't respond to these things very peacefully.
Temperature. It's going to stop bubbling. It's going to start bursting out into the open. Okay?
Wow, it's going to go from bubble to burst.
Meanwhile...
is he describing like revolution as it?
Trump administration is moving forward. It's interesting to watch because Trump 2.0, I will say, is much more efficient, significantly more directed than Trump 1.0.
How would efficient at what? It hasn't even started yet, Ben.
Which makes sense. Donald Trump had never held public office before he was elected president in 2016. Now,
I mean, you could really argue that he didn't then either. I mean, it was like Reagan.
Been president once. He knows where the bodies are buried. He knows what needs to get...
Well, he buried quite a few of them himself. Now, I love that the term that he uses is he knows where the bodies are buried, when he's been going on about how you don't get to talk about how the system isn't really violent. Well, David Graeber was one of the people who was using the term, but actually it was in the original Ad Stoppers appeal to Occupy Wall Street already. So a whole bunch of... that was a collective publication.
Done. And the biggest threat to the Trump presidency is being distracted by shiny baubles. It's being distracted by sort of dumb rhetorical fights.
That's your entire career, though, Ben.
But Donald Trump is set for a historic presidency right now. And you're seeing the people surrounding him, encouraging him in the right way, I think, toward that. Laura Trump, who of course is the head of the RNC, she pointed out that Donald Trump is not seeking revenge. Now, by the way, I think this is true. I think that the Donald Trump is seeking revenge narrative is something that Democrats are promoting as an excuse to blanket pardon all of their friends.
Well, they don't need an excuse to blanket pardon all their friends. That's something they've always done. I mean, a lot of people look at the Hunter Biden pardon and it's like, fuck him. I mean, but that isn't something that Trump started. Like, Clinton did tons of it. Reagan did tons of it. I mean, doing favors for the cronies has been a feature of this system from the start. I mean, we're talking about a regime that was founded by a bunch of rich landholding slave owners who said that only the people they played golf or croquet or whatever the fuck they did in those days with should even be allowed to vote in the thing. When you got that kind of with that kind of environment, you're gonna get a couple of crony pardons is all.
Is Donald Trump did not seek revenge his first time around, and it is not revenge.
Well, I mean, except there was the time that he put a hit out on an anti-fascist in the Pacific Northwest, and then bragged about how a federal goon squad murdered him.
To fire people who were involved in things like Russiagate. That is not revenge. That is the proper response to blowing it on your job. Here's Lara Trump yesterday.
Blowing what?
We remember how he was the first term in office. He didn't start World War III. He was actually the first president in 82 years not to start a new war.
He kind of continued a number of them, though.
Get America into a new war.
Well, yeah, the thing is that the U.S. was involved in was like waging war against so many countries. You kind of had to stop one or two of those before the U.S. could even start a new war. Because otherwise, you're going to be spread too thin.
And much in the same way, I think people are going to see very quickly that this is a man who really just wants to go in there and take charge of this country as the American people mandated.
Yeah, except that only about a third of the population even voted for this guy, and when you actually break that down to people who actually like him, we're talking about less than 20%.
Secure our border, bring down inflation, get us out of wars, and do the right things for America. He has no intention on retribution or revenge.
Well, I mean, he said things about that, though.
Yeah, again, he has things to do, and I think that is the point.
Yeah, exactly. The point is what those things are.
We're starting to see corporate CEOs, people who were not friendly to Donald Trump, realize this. So Jeff Bezos, the head of Amazon, and also tangentially the Washington Post, because who cares about the Washington Post? Bezos says that he thinks that Donald Trump is calmer and more settled now, that he actually has an agenda.
Optimistic.
Like, who gives a shit?
I'm super about this president.
Oh, of course he's optimistic. He's optimistic about however it comes out. Motherfucker, like, when you're in a position like Bezos, you've got the race both ways. You're going to win. Your bet is going to come in one way or another.
I'm very optimistic that President Trump is serious about this regulatory agenda, and I think he has a good chance.
Yeah, about deregulating things. What the fuck?
Succeeding.
What about the idea that he thinks that the press is the enemy?
Well, I think I'm going to try to talk him out of that idea.
Well, yeah, I mean, he is wrong. The press was actually, his lapdog, for the most part.
I don't think the press is the enemy.
Well, you own the fucking press. Of course you don't think the press is the enemy.
He's also... you've probably grown in the last 8 years. He has too. Like, this is not the case. The press is not the enemy.
I hope you're right.
I hope I'm right.
Well, let's see. They're at a New York Times book summit, and the owner of the Washington Post is right there. Yeah, that's fucking Bezos. I've never actually seen him, live before. But, yeah, so, okay, two people associated with the two of the most powerful media outlets in the world agreeing that the press is not the enemy, one of whom owns one of the two most powerful outlets in the world.
Too.
Have you talked?
Let's go persuade him of this. No, let's do it about it. But you and I should go. Let's go.
I mean, I remember liberals were saying that Bezos was terrified of Trump, and that's why they pulled that endorsement. It's like, no, if Bezos woke up with Trump's money and power, he would cry. Bezos buys and sells guys like Trump.
Talk to him.
If we could try.
I really don't. I think that this is absolutely...
This is now I see why he was getting roasted in the comments. He thought that the best way to show how wonderful things are or whatever was to ask one of the richest scumbags on the planet, was to like show a clip from one of the richest scumbags on the planet.
I don't think he's going to see it the same way, but maybe I'll be wrong.
Was that always your thought, by the way?
What I've seen,
he looks like he's about to hold the entire world hostage for $1 million.
So far is that
it's been a long time since I saw Austin Powers. I'm not sure if that accent is right.
He is calmer than he was the first time and more confident, more settled.
I mean, first of all, that's actually true. And the reason that's true is because Donald Trump is oriented toward victory. He just won the last victory he can win in the political sphere. Like,
the last.
He won. It's over. There's not going to be a third term for President Trump. It's not constitutional. So that means that he now knows.
Well, I mean, a lot of things aren't constitutional, and then they happen.
That he has won. And that gives him a feeling of solidity, for sure. And a feeling that now he just has to pursue his agenda. That there's nothing...
Yeah, I mean, and there's nothing violent about Trump's agenda, of course.
...be done to take that victory away from him. He is right about all of that. In here, Andrew Ross Sorkin from the New York Times being very skeptical about that. But again, I think that's a build-up in the head of people who tend to be on the left. That, oh my gosh.
Yeah, the left, like Bezos and the fucking New York Times.
It's going to be chaos and terror. Here's the thing. It wasn't even during the first administration. The second administration is going to be a lot more...
One of the fascinating things I was noticing this when we were looking at Tim Pool yesterday, is... I mean, it's fascinating to watch things propagate throughout the right-wing bullshitosphere. Because it used to be that they would just treat liberals and whatever progressives are and the left as all the same thing. Like, you know, like communists are just Hillary Clinton, but more so or something. And then, as far as I can tell, this changed with fucking Jeff Prager. No, I mean, not Jeff Prager, Dennis Prager. A few months ago does this thing, the differences between liberals and leftists. And I have to say, I mean, it wasn't the most inaccurate thing he's done. I will say he was not... I mean, it was bullshit, but it was, like, somewhat closer to reality than usual, and ever since then, you see people in this cinematic universe making that distinction way more.
...pointed than that.
Including people who had never made that distinction before.
...to cut the red tape, which, of course, should be good for everybody. By the way...
well, yeah, I mean, like, because Bezos is really happy about his regulatory agenda, which means, like, deregulating everything, so therefore it's good for everybody.
...to John Fetterman, who came out and said that he's in favor of Elon Musk over at Doge. Like, this should be about...
Yeah, wow, John Fetterman, that was... that guy just sucks. It's really amazing. I mean, it really just shows how... It's just how insulting... the propaganda system really can be, because the idea is we were supposed to believe Fetterman was progressive because he dresses like shit. That was it. He did not have a progressive background. He was always very much a right-wing Democrat, very, like, virulently pro-Israel. I mean, he's, of course, broken up about the death of Brian Thompson, and, I mean, I can understand that, because Brian Thompson was very close to his wallet. Like, all the top recipients of United Healthcare money in Congress have been mourning demonstratively on Twitter. But, like, there was absolutely nothing, but it was like, look, he showed up in sweatpants. That means he's progressive, you know, like George Costanza in that 90s show.
The bipartisan thing, going through and ripping away the red tape and ripping away the useless government spending.
If we're talking about Trump, I think it's very interesting.
Okay, is he just changing the subject entirely? I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, because...
Tell you, they don't play around. You could face wage garnishments, frozen bank accounts, even property seizures if you haven't taken action yet. Here's the good news. Capsules every day, your body knows precisely what to do.
Wow, it's a laxative.
Trump could have won the 2024 election without winning any of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, or Michigan. Any of them. Because
Like,
that's how-
okay, I think we're done with this video because I think he's just totally changed the subject here. So I am going to switch over. We've got 18 minutes. And we're going to look at Jenks signals time for change at the Young Turfs.
Hello, everybody. David Schuster
It's a short
here.
one.
In today's video, we're going to discuss the rise in the United States of populism. It is resonating with...
Oh, God, I hate this fucking term. Like, seriously, the term populism just needs to fucking die. Because all it's used for is to do two things. One is to whitewash fascism, and the other is to link leftism to fascism by putting them all under the heading of populism.
With average Americans, even as the political elite seem to be struggling to understand why the movement has so much impact.
Look, you can't underestimate
What movement are you fucking talking about?
also Hillary Clinton herself. And what everybody says is that, you know, as a person and as a politician, well, I guess when she gets the job, she is much more impressive than she is as a candidate.
Yeah, that has not been my experience of her. I thought she was much less impressive as Secretary of State.
And you have this quote about how she didn't understand some things, and this is in Shattered, page 145. I don't understand what's happening with the country. I can't get my arms around it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that she has absolutely no understanding of what, like, ordinary people are living through. Like, I mean, let's just remember Bill Clinton, back in the early 90s, put her in charge of his big healthcare reform that did such a wonderful job of, solving all the healthcare problems, which is why everybody's so happy and chill about the way the healthcare system is run right now. But so, in one book on the subject, I forget which one, I read this several years ago, somebody came to her, you know, during the early brainstorming phases, and said, one of her, like, staff said, you know, one solution that has majority support is single payer. And she said, tell me something interesting. Like, she literally didn't give a fuck. And then during the campaign, at one point, she actually likened people wanting to have health care to a child wanting a pony.
There's this rise.
So I can believe that she has absolutely no idea what's going on with the country, at least with the population. She has no connection to them. Never has had.
Going on around her, and there she is on a plane confiding to one of her closest confidants and a longtime aide of the Clintons. You know, I can't really grasp what's happening. And here she is opposing Bernie Sanders in the primary, who is filling up, you know...
Yes, that's right. She had slaves, too.
And people are really excited for his campaign, and then in the general she'll face Donald Trump, who's doing the same thing, and she doesn't quite understand what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I buy that she does not understand what's happening.
2016, Hillary Clinton found herself navigating a challenging political landscape wedged between two...
That's an interesting way of putting it. I would have said that she was just a horrible candidate that nobody liked to begin with. Half of the population for entirely valid reasons, half of the population because of some bullshit Rush Limbaugh said. But, and she basically spent her entire time showing how she'd earned everybody's contempt.
Populist movements that captivated distinct voter bases. On one side, Bernie Sanders galvanized progressives with his call for economic reform, targeting wealth inequality and proposing bold measures like Medicare for all and free...
here we go again with this complete reversal of the chronology. Like, Bernie Sanders started a fucking movement. No, he did not. Bernie Sanders was nothing. Nobody had heard of that jabroni outside of Vermont, or like really, really terminally, electoral leftist tragics who like just paid attention to him because of that, and nobody had heard of him. I mean, he's a huge name because he recognized that Occupy was his moment and that he would be able to surf on that wave. He did not start any fucking movement. There was a movement already. Hello, imperialism bad, como vai? There was already a movement, and he then showed up and declared himself the leader of it.
College tuition. The Sanders campaign drew huge, enthusiastic crowds and energized younger voters.
Is nobody checking the focus on this camera?
Many of whom viewed Clinton.
This motherfucker is blurry as hell.
Political establishment. On the other side, Donald Trump's brand of right-wing populism tapped into frustration with globalization, immigration, and political elites.
Ooh, that's an interesting way of saying white supremacism and anti-Semitism. See, this is what I'm talking about. This is why the term populism needs to fucking die. Well, we just got done looking at Ben Shapiro being very angry that revolutionary leftists, as he put it, were laughing about the United Healthcare CEO got popped. And then looking at his YouTube comments, where it turned out his own audience was telling him he was totally out of touch, and actually they can totally understand it and don't condemn it. Now, I mean, this is what I'm talking about when I say that the term populism needs to die, because here he is using populism to take, white supremacism, white nationalism, fascism, and various kinds of from social democracy to revolutionary anti-capitalism, put them all in one place.
Trump's rhetoric and policies appeal to disaffected voters in key swing states.
That's an interesting way of saying white supremacists with
whom felt left behind by economic shifts and
no, they didn't. God, this is so wild that they're still going with this. We have the fucking polling. Nein, da ist höchstens ein lauwarmer Sozialdemokrat, der Sanders. Das war er eigentlich schon immer. Ein besserer Sozialdemokrat war er in den 80er Jahren. Seit er bundespolitisch unterwegs ist, ist er ein verdammt... der ist ja einfach eine ungesalzene Kartoffel. We've had the figures on who votes for Trump for quite some time, and it is people who are way better off. Their median income is 30K better than the median income of people who vote for Democrats, and both of their incomes are significantly better than that of people who don't vote. It isn't people who are left behind, it is people who are actually, economically ahead.
Alienated by Washington politics. Clinton's challenge was to appeal to a broad coalition, uniting traditional Democrats, progressives, and moderates, while countering the anti-establishment momentum of both Sanders and Trump. This dynamic left the Clinton campaign trying to bridge...
Yeah, no, I mean, Sanders didn't have any anti-establishment momentum. I mean, to the there was fucking anti-establishment momentum associated with his supporters. Yes. But, I mean, it wasn't coming from Sanders. Sanders was just trying to, bottle that up and...
gaps between factions within our own party while responding to Trump's unprecedented style and populist appeal, which reshaped the political discourse.
See how they're using populist? I mean, this is why fuck the word populist.
Counter. In hindsight, 2016 wasn't just an election, it was a reckoning. A seismic shift that redefined how President...
Who the hell is David Schuster, anyway? Never heard of this guy. David... Who? Okay. Emmy Award-winning journalist. What's he done? Bloomington, Indiana. Better part of Indiana. Okay, he's been around for a while. He's way older than he looks. I mean, he reported on the first Gulf War, for fuck's sake. He does not look that old. Okay, so this guy is just regular ass See, he filled in for Keith Olbermann, Chris Matthews, Ed Schultz, and Rachel Maddow. So, MSNBC Live. So, just a very bog standard guy.
Power is sought and won in the United States. The old strategies of political campaigns, carefully calibrated messaging, reliance on party loyalty, and appeals to institutional trust, were upended by the raw emotional force of populism. Since then, populism has become...
Gay God, stop saying populism. You're making my head explode. Like, use meaningful terms, David. Please, use meaningful terms. And maybe consider the possibility that the reason that people who at least had the appearance of being a departure from, like, establishment politics had that appeal is because people had been longing for that for a very long time. I mean, again, we can go back to the polls, and if you actually look at the polls, what you find is, overwhelmingly, when people are asked, would you like to have more options than just Democrats and Republicans, more than 50% say yes, they would. They're sick of those motherfuckers.
The driving force of U.S. presidential elections, reshaping the battlefield and forcing candidates to adapt or risk irrelevance. Clearly, in 2024, Kamala Harris didn't do enough to convince voters that she was a candidate of change.
Yeah, I know. I mean, this guy apparently was old enough to be a journo reporting on location during the first Gulf War, and yet he looks my age. Like, I was like 10 years old during that. Yeah, actually, I mean, although maybe it's just that he's out of focus, because he is out of focus. Maybe if you put him in focus, he suddenly...
Economic ideas had some populist appeal. Harris was dragged down by the perception, fair or not, that she was part of the status quo.
Well, you mean because she was vice president? That is kind of a status quo kind of job.
It underscores that Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump in 2016 were trailblazers. Sanders lit a fire among progressives with promises of dramatic change, railing against billionaires and Wall Street. Trump utilized a different brand of populism, mobile...
Yeah, and I can't wait to hear how he avoids saying fascism, white supremacism, white nationalism, and anti-Semitism this time.
...mobilizing those who felt forgotten by globalization and demographic change.
Oh, that's a new one. Those who feel forgotten by globalization and demographic change. Well, I mean, the euphemisms are coming hot and heavy here.
In the political analyst world, there is a feeling that the old political establishment, which was crumbling for several years, has finally been defeated.
Yeah, several years, several decades more like. I mean, again, if you look at the polling, if you look at things like vote abstention... Oh, wait, I think I must have missed... Sorry to hear you lost a friend. Phoenix. That sucks. I mean... Whew. I've lost a lot of respect for a lot of people in the past year, specifically over Zionism myself. But it is now time to wrap up. Thank you to everyone who joined in. I hope you enjoyed the stream. And if you would like to keep in touch in between streams, let me just give you that Discord link in case you're not already there. And I will be back on Friday next at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Have a good rest of your weekend.